YouTube, Awesome Rider here. This is going to be my video discussing the Kamen Rider Gotchard movie Daybreak. Like I said in the title, I finally watched it. It's interesting because this was a movie that I both wanted to watch and not wanted to watch at the same time. To be fair, I've been pretty bad about keeping up with Toku movies. I had a good momentum last year before, oddly enough, Gotchard kind of took the wind out of my sails. Is that a saying? I think I've heard people say that. I'm trying to sound smart. Was that even something that smart people would say? What am I talking about? I'm bad at keeping up with Toku movies, because the ones that come out during the series, we don't get till later, so I forget about them. And I feel like we get so many post-series movies, it feels like keeping up with DLC. I'm like, I just want to play the sequel. I'm tired of all this in-between content. But with Gotchard, obviously, if you're watching this, you might know my series experience with this wasn't the best. So I wasn't really eager to revisit that series and see Hotaro, and I'm like, this is just gonna put me in a bad mood if I watch it. But at the same time, I actually really quite liked the Daybreak character and that whole story. I think that was maybe the only thing I really was ever intrigued about in the series, and I was curious about it. So I simultaneously wanted to watch this and didn't. And then eventually I was in kind of I guess, good enough mood to click on it. And so, yeah, I watched it. And that's the end of this video. Anyway, until next time. No, I'm just kidding. So that was a dumb fake out. Honestly, I enjoyed it for what it was. I definitely still had some problems with it. Some of the problems I still have with Gotchard overall are still in there. I'm going to try to keep the Hotaro bashing at a minimum. I'm obviously going to have to bring up some comparisons at some point. But I had a decent enough time with it. I'm not sure what post-series content they have planned. I doubt I would want to watch it. I think if they did a Daybreak movie, or V-Cinema type thing, I would probably watch that. That might be the only thing. But I'm kind of grateful that if this is my last experience in the Gotchard world, it went out on a little bit of a better note than the series. Not like the series finale was awful, but you know how I felt about the series. So, the movie definitely was a mess. I'm gonna be honest, I'll be hard-pressed to think of Toku movies off the top of my head that aren't a mess. But it was still enjoyable. It had enough things I really liked in it. But it is funny because it kind of felt like a microcosm of the series in the sense that the main plot was pretty straightforward. It's basically a Future Trunks thing where him going to the past changed it and just created a split timeline instead of changing the actual future. It's kind of like in-game time travel in a way, but the Future Trunks things make more sense. But the main plot is you find that out, but his future's still in trouble, so the present day heroes want to help out his troubled future. That's it. But then there's all these other things happening. Legend is there for, in my opinion, no reason at all, and then frickin' Decade shows up, which we're going to talk about in a couple minutes, and then of course they have that forced Gav cameo, which I forgot about. Those always take me by surprise because I'm aware of them when they're happening in real time in Japan, because you'll see the blurry clips posted on Twitter, which somehow have more clarity than any early writer in Sentai Scan ever given, which still consistently have the first ones look like they're being taken by someone being actively tased, and they're also taking it with a potato. But anyway, what was I even talking about? I went way too long on that bit, and it wasn't even worth it. Oh yeah, the Gav cameo. When those happen, people post them on Twitter because you want to hear what the belt sounds like and whatever, but then now we're 15, 16 episodes into Gav, so it just seemed weird. With those, I wish they found a different way to do them. I kind of prefer when they had little teases at the end of the series, or it should almost be like a post-credit thing, I think, instead of having it shoved in there, because I know this is just silly fun stuff, but just Toku has such an utter disregard for sense and continuity, it drives me crazy. I feel that's what drives me crazy about the continuity and the logic of the crossover movies for Rider and Sentai, is it's basically at the core the logic of that scene in Elf where he's kids aren't going to notice if it's missing 2 pages. And that drives me up a wall. So Gav just showing up makes no sense. It takes me out of the movie, not as if it's a movie I'm super invested in, I'm really into the plot. I'm you ruined a masterpiece. But I just wish that it would be a tacked on almost post-credit scene, after the movie's over, after the credits, or even before the credits, or mid-credits, whatever. There's a scene where you just have your main rider fighting just an average run-of-the-mill battle, and then the other guy happens to show up. So it kind of exists in just this teaser space, rather than just making no sense at all. It just felt this movie was so busy, and I'm why are you here? What are you doing here, Gav? And then the other stuff that was weird is so the Legend stuff. And it's really interesting because Daybreak and Legend kind of appeared around the same time. I mean, Legend had those little webisodes, but Legend and Daybreak had roles in the story around the same time. And there were so many rumors around when that happened, and I never really looked into how much was concrete, but there was rumors of the Daybreak storyline existing as well as Legend being pushed into the series because Gotchard wasn't doing so well. There was also people saying Legend was there to celebrate the 5th anniversary of Reiwa, which I mean, that sounds like something Toei would do. I mean, we're one step away from doing 1, 2, 3-year anniversary celebrations. It's getting sickening. I never saw anything no logo or any promotional stuff being celebrating the 5th anniversary of Reiwa by transforming into primarily Heisei riders. So I don't think that was it, honestly. I really do think that there's some credence to Legend being pushed to sort of generate more excitement. But I couldn't help but think in this, like one of the points I keep making is like, I know I just talked about the reasons Legend possibly was in it, but I wish they would have saved him. It's such a cool idea. I'm like, this should have been the 10th anniversary Reiwa series. Like, I'm curious what that's going to look like, because I'd be shocked if at some point in the next decade, no pun intended, we didn't get another Geo Decade-like anniversary series, and I'm like, well, what are they going to do now? I mean, I'm sure they have ideas, but Legend would have been perfect. I would have honestly been, I don't want to say happy, because if I never saw another Toku crossover again, then I would maybe find true happiness. But I mean, I would have been happy with Legend like being the 10th anniversary Reiwa series and kind of have this semi-constant of every 10 years having a writer anniversary series that's kind of connected to the last one. And it's such a cool idea and a cool character. I overall really liked him, and I'm like, you should have saved this. It feels like such a waste for feeling like a shoehorned in crossover content. He feels like he comes from a timeline where he had his own show, but it got erased, and so he's just kind of living in our world now. So, like, I was thinking in this, like, I wish they would have saved that, because he really does feel so random. And in this movie, he did not need to be there at all. Like, the only purpose he served is just the shallow stuff of, like, oh, look, Legend writers, and then the random decade scene. And the only other purpose is, like, there's some exposition he gives at the beginning, but that could have been handled in, like, a dozen other ways. Like, he didn't need to be here. Like, I wasn't upset about it, but I felt like you're just making this feel like more of a mess than it needs to be. Because he has freaking Decade show up, which was an unexpected surprise, and I think I heard Decade died. I don't know. I never watched the Geo movies because I had a mixed experience with Geo 2. Not the form, but Geo, like, also. And I actually started to rewatch Geo a couple years ago and was having a little bit of a better time, and I kind of wanted to finish that rewatch before I watched the movies, but I never watched them to see what Decade's fate was, so I don't know what's going on with him. And this scene implied that they met before. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember if that happened in, like, Legend's previous appearances, whether he mentioned that, or is there some sort of webisode where they met before? But I don't know. It was an interesting little scene. It kind of felt like a passing of the torch, and it just made me think, like, they should have saved this. You know, they should have saved it, and it just feels so out of place. And the reason I bring that up, talking mostly about Legend in this Gotchard review, is when I was thinking about that, I'm like, I wish they would have saved Legend, and instead of Legend being like the Hail Mary to give Gotchard interest, I wish they would have just more focused on Daybreak. Like, I'm sure it's an easier fix to have like Legend content to boost your ratings and your sales or whatever than a future version of a character that's not going so well. But I was just thinking about that, because I really like what they did with Daybreak, and I think it could have almost been a meta commentary on Hotaro is such a wimpy character. Like, he really feels more like he should have been one of the alchemy students, and somehow he's the main character. Like, he just has no aura at all, he has negative aura, and standing next to his badass counterpart just proved that. But there could have been an almost meta story if in the second half of the series you brought in Daybreak as almost a regular reoccurring character and have a story about him, like, kind of in a meta way, having Hotaro toughen up and actually have a presence and more of a heroic presence and get him to become a version of the man Daybreak's going to be, while of course simultaneously doing what you did with Hotaro here, which is reminding future Hotaro of like the good things about Chemis and his friends and stuff, which this very much reminded me of the Ben 10,000 episode in the original Ben 10 series where Gwen brought Ben, that's a tough sentence to say for some reason, to the future to show Ben 10,000, like, remember Whimsy and stuff like that. So that could have been cool. Like, there could have been a storyline where you're effectively duplicating your protagonist and you're getting this older, cooler version that you can actually be inspired by as a cool character. And then you have this sort of dual mentor storyline where he helps Hotaro toughen up and then he helps Daybreak soften up. I thought that could have been interesting. Not to mention everything just about the future storyline was more interesting. Like, I liked the backstory of, they showed where the timelines deviate, you know, how the other characters died. I liked the explanation of, like, Rin's soul or whatever going into her sun card, and that's what kind of changed all of his outfits to the Daybreak thing. I initially assumed in the series that, you know, when he got the fire form, that in the original timeline, that's the fire form was Daybreak, but then when he got the other fire form, that was a sign of the timeline changing. I don't know if that was just me being off base, but I liked the explanation for that. I thought it was a good, solid backstory, and I'm just watching this, like, obviously it kind of felt like the finale of that story, but I'm like, this whole storyline and incorporating Daybreak, I think would have been a better way to, quote-unquote, save the series and make a more interesting second half and then just save Legend for later, because this just worked pretty well. And also, they did a really good job casting older Hotaro. Like, he looked like an older version of him. Like, I know that's the point, but you know what I mean. We've all seen shows or movies where there's varying degrees of they look like they could be the older version. Most of the time, quite frankly, it doesn't work out that way, but I thought they did a really good job on the casting for that. Honestly, like, the main storyline was overall pretty solid. I was kind of disappointed. I was like, oh, Grayon's in this? But there was some funny moments where they kept doing this, like, reveal thing where like a villain was somebody you knew, but it's like, no, they're just stealing their face. And they did that like 3 times. I don't know what the purpose of that was other than getting the other cast members involved, but they already had them involved in some stupid storyline where they were protecting the past. I'm like, they could have just all went to the future. Like, I know they gave a reason for it, but they didn't have to anyway. But that was just stupid. I kind of wish like one of them had been evil. Like, was it, I don't remember, it was one of the sisters, I can't remember which one was, she was killed and then like the villains took her visage. I'm like, they could have had her turn. Like, you can do whatever you want with these alternate universe versions, but it just seemed so silly that they kept doing that. Like, they would rip off the mask and be like, oh my god, it's the professor. I'm like, no, it's not, it's a golem or whatever. Like, we've done this 3 times already. Like, even at the very end, Greyon was revealed to not be Greyon and he was like one of the villains that just took his face. I thought that was really weird. There was also all kinds of other small little things, like just lots of cameos by chemies and stuff. Like, there was a cameo by the human chemi, and I don't remember the name of the iPad kid, but he wore like the UFO armor, which was kind of fun. Like, it was funny because a lot of these things, it felt like the greatest hits of the overall series, which made it feel like a series finale movie, even though I believe this aired before the finale aired. It was just kind of interesting because there was just so many little Easter eggs and details and elements included that made it feel like an overall finale movie. And just the other thing is, just watching this, I couldn't help but be disappointed by how much missed potential there was, because I really love the designs and concept of the series. Like, just watching this and seeing the different suits and the chemis and the ideas, I'm like, you could have been so much more! Like, for real. Like, it's not like I wanted to hate this series, it's just the story and the cast, mainly Hotaro, dragged it down, and I was like, there was so much potential here. And you know what, one good thing is though, is that I feel good about, if I ever find one for a good price, getting a Daybreak figure art, because I love the Gotchard main suit. And I was gonna get the figure art, but Hotaro just killed it for me that I'm like, I cannot give you shelf space. But I like Daybreak enough, and I think I actually prefer his version of the suit a little bit, that I think I'll get that figure art. But yeah, this movie definitely was a bit of a mess, but I had a decent time watching it. I wish there was some of the messier things weren't in there, but the core storyline was actually pretty interesting, and it kind of gave me a window into like what could have been if Daybreak had been more of a part of the series. I'm curious why they decided to shuffle it off to a movie and not make it more a part of the series. Like, in a way, it's kind of confusing because you have Legend, who debuted in a like webisode thingy, and then he comes into the series, so you might feel lost if you didn't watch that. And then you have Gotchard's future version, which is teed up as a big thing, but then you don't resolve that until a movie. Like, obviously our experience here is different because, you know, we have to just wait for it to come out subbed somewhere, and we might forget about it. But I'm curious about the fans, young and old. Like, do any of them ever feel lost because they missed or forgot? Like, maybe they didn't know that Legend Special was airing. Like, I don't know. It just feels very weird. And I wish it would have been handled differently. Like I said, I really saw the missed potential here. And just even with this, Daybreak and all this stuff, I'm like, they had the elements to actually make a much more interesting second half than whatever they did. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it for what it was. I think it was worth the watch for the Daybreak stuff. I think that was maybe, I don't want to say the only positive thing, but one of the only concrete things I'll hold on to in more of a fond light from Gotchard. But did you guys watch the movie? What did you think of it? Did you like it better than the series? Do you wish Daybreak had been more of a part of the main series? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.